important breaking news this hour. A federal judge says Donald Trump's effort to stop Congress from certifying the 2020 election results was, quote, more likely than not, a crime. The judge's comments came as he ruled attorney John Eastman, who was working with Trump, must turn over 101 emails to the January 6th committee. As Paul Reed joins us with the latest on this. This is the decision here. Paul, it's a big deal. The president saying more likely than not, the then president of the United States committed a crime.
This is a huge deal, and it's a really big win for the House Select Committee. Lawmakers have previously used this litigation over John Eastman's emails to lay out their theory of potential criminal conduct by former President Trump. In a previous filing, they argued that conservative attorney John Eastman and former President Trump engaged in a conspiracy to perpetuate a fraud against the American people by trying to overturn the election results. And here, moments ago, you have a federal judge agreeing, saying, yes, it's more likely than not that they were planning a crime. So this is the first time you have the federal courts affirming that the former president may have engaged in criminal conduct. It's likely that this decision will embolden lawmakers to make a potential criminal referral to the Justice Department.
That has been a question from the beginning. Would Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's attorney general, who came in with a very important mission, depoliticize the department, facing more and more calls to do more here?
Yeah, and you know, the John Eastman case in particular, Democrats in Congress had made clear in talking about it that they were watching it carefully because they thought that whatever happens in that case could set some precedent for some of these other Trump allies and aides whose cases are up in the air, particularly because increasingly we have seen how much they are trying to rely on the argument of executive privilege to keep their communications, keep their actions from surrounding January 6th private and secret. Now that we have a judge saying those emails have to be turned over, that could certainly influence what happens with everybody else who's trying to keep their communications in private as well.
And that's why the word you use, conspiracy, matters so much in the sense that normally maybe an attorney's emails about his client or with his client, conversations are privileged, but not if you're part of a conspiracy, not if you're part of a criminal act as you do it. Another question for Ginny Thomas now being raised by the committee. We're told the January 6th committee wants to interview, will reach out for an interview with Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Now, she's long been active in conservative groups in the Tea Party, but we saw last week some of these simply startling text messages to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows saying, be more aggressive. We'll get the army in the streets. We have to overturn the election. To your word, conspiracy. Adam Kinzinger, one of the two Republicans on the committee, says maybe she has the right to say this, maybe not.
If a private citizen has a conversation, of course, we have a freedom of speech in this country. The question for the committee is this or any exchange. Was there a conspiracy or an attempt to come up with a reason, or how close did we get to overturn an election?
It's one of the fascinating questions still. The committee has made a ton of progress in piecing together myriad groups and individuals into this conspiracy or plan. I'll call it a plan. I'm not a lawyer. The question, Ginny Thomas.
Yeah, amazing to look at her text messages to and from Mark Meadows. Of course, she has access to Mark Meadows because of who her husband is, right? She is a private citizen, but her husband also sits on the Supreme Court. So there are questions for whether or not Justice Thomas should have recused himself from some cases involving January 6th, and whether or not going forward there will be rules put in place for that. Chief Justice John Roberts has talked about maybe there does need to be a code of conduct. But in terms of the January 6th committee and what she has to say, these emails reveal that she was deeply, pushing this conspiracy theory, pushing people around the president to try to overturn the government, obviously present on January 6th as well, and we'll see if she comes before this committee. One of the things that she says in the text message is she refers to talking to her best friend, right? And no one really knows who the best friend is, right? The big question, of course, is the best friend Clarence Thomas? Were they sort of going back and forth and talking about and believing in this conspiracy theory, which again goes to Justice Thomas's credibility and his judgment?
Which is, again, the committee wants to interview you. If you have nothing to hide, voluntarily appear. Don't drag it out, voluntarily appear. You mentioned the text messages. It was discussed somewhat last week, but here's one of them. Do not concede. It takes time for the army who is gathering for his back. Army. Or, I can't see Americans swallowing the obvious fraud. There was no fraud, but that's what she writes. Just going with one more thing, no freaking consequences. The whole coup and now this. We just caved to people wanting Biden to be anointed. Many of us can't continue the GOP charade. What she's writing is factual lunacy. but it gets at the emotions behind these people who are pushing Mark Meadows, do more, get people to do more.
That's right, and an obvious reason that these text messages are particularly alarming to a lot of people is because people expect, there is a general expectation that justices on the Supreme Court are supposed to be completely removed from politics, that they are supposed to be completely impartial. When you have the spouse of one of the justices writing this and putting these thoughts down in writing, I think it makes some people in the public at least wonder, well, these are private conversations, but could that affect how a justice behaves?
Right, which is an important conversation right now in the sense that for years people have said there should be a published set of ethics guidelines. The Supreme Court essentially runs its own business. Now you have members of Congress, and you mentioned Chief Justice Roberts has talked about this. There's a member of Congress saying talk time is over. Give us clear rules or we will impose them on you.
Absolutely. The Chief Justice has said, look, trust us on this. The guidelines don't apply to us, but trust us. But in the wake of this, a lot of questions for Justice Thomas. Now, his wife has long said that she tries to distance her work from her husband's work, but we also know publicly they've referred to one another as being best friends. So a lot of questions right here about whether he should have stepped aside or going forward if he should recuse himself from future 1-6 litigation.
Very important questions. We'll stay on it. We'll be right back.